Hello, dear friends. We are sincerely happy to welcome you again. Today we will talk to the esteemed Igor Mikhailovich Danilov.
Greetings.
Igor Mikhailovich, in the modern world, a human lives, as they say, at high speeds in a mode of multitasking, all sorts of bustle, overwork, stress, and so on. And certainly, everyone actually wants to escape from this whirlpool of everyday problems and troubles in order to sort of reset, to accumulate energy, and to become stronger spiritually. One of the first solutions that comes to a person's mind is to change his surroundings. For example, to live for a few weeks to some wonderful place with beautiful nature in order to be in harmony with himself and to carry out sort of a spiritual reset. And he has high expectations that during this period, he will definitely manage to gain some kind of inner experience through feelings and to perform daily spiritual practices. As a rule, our friends shared that when they change their surroundings in such a way, they do not even always manage to perform practices. Consciousness immediately says, "You are relaxed anyway. Why would you need autogenic training? Just look, why is the practice of contemplating the nature around not enough of a practice for you, which will give you both inspiration and strength?" Yet, as a result of such a rest, such a switch, and such a fresh start, instead of strength, a person, on the contrary, feels that a spiritual decline has occurred. The wave is wrong, and he has even rolled a few steps back. Thus, a question arises, how is that? A person seemed to have taken everything into account. He changed the surroundings, that is, he changed the external conditions, and it seems that something should change inside him. Yet such a wonderful tool as vacation, relaxation, reset, and emotional release hasn't worked. Why does this happen?
Everything is actually simple. We hope that by getting away from routine and going on vacation, we will be able to change something. We will be able to sort of dedicate more attention to practice, as you say, because in everyday life we have work, family, household chores, and many other things. And for our volunteers, let's say it's even harder because they have a lot of responsibility, they have to do a lot of good and important tasks. Whereas if they go on vacation and they would have more time, not only do you rest, but you can also focus on your inner world, right?
Yes, exactly.
But I have a simple question. Who pushes people to go on vacation and why? And what is the concept of vacation in general? Let's begin with the fact that we as humankind adopted this culture of vacationing not that long ago. Actually, we began to go to resorts or somewhere else only recently. It wasn't the case before. It just wasn't. Such a concept did not exist. It used to be somehow wrong to go somewhere on vacation. However, nowadays, this is normal for us. And we invest all of our attention in it throughout the year, thinking that a miracle will happen on vacation. It won't.
And who drives a person to go on vacation?
That's what I'm saying. Who drives him there?
And why?
Well, it's a hope that something might actually change since we have changed our surroundings. As a matter of fact, we are trying to get rid of those problems which have already exhausted us with their routine occurrence. But in reality, if we look at the core, we are trying to get away from ourselves, to change something. However, we go there together with ourselves. And that is why nothing changes. As soon as we arrive at our vacation, we try to start resting like everyone else.
To relax, right?
To relax, to lie on the beach. As soon as we shift our attention from inner work to something external, a trivial, let's say, fight takes place. Or to be more correct, a capture of us as a self, as personality, by consciousness. In other words, the demon begins to win.
This very vigilance begins to slacken.
Of course. After all, what have we come for? To relax. Isn't that the directive it gave us?
Yes, exactly.
And here's the answer. The demon drives us there so that we relax and take a break from him. While in fact, he often does that only to drive us into even greater slavery. Right? Well, our hopes that if we change our surroundings, something will drastically change for us do not come true in this case.
Oftentimes, such decisions basically come when consciousness is nagging the most to change the surroundings. Let's relax.
Well, yes, that it is tired. All this comes from consciousness. And there's one little point here. As you said, consciousness is nagging the most. My friends, this is the most golden time. When your consciousness begins to feel oppressed, it begins to get very indignant, to push you towards changing something. It doesn't matter what exactly. If it is possible to move somewhere. If it's not possible to move, then at least to go on vacation somewhere. Meet with friends or do something else, at least move furniture in the house. Just any changes. And if consciousness insists on this very strongly, if it feels that, let's say, it is shrinking, it starts looking for a way out. Why? Have I given the example that it is shrinking? If you sit down and calm down at the moment when you want changes, to change something, moreover to do it urgently and consciousness insists on that, you feel it almost physically. Just sit down, relax. Look at what is happening inside at that moment. And you will understand that consciousness really feels a kind of a compression, even at the physical level that is transmitted through the neurons of your brain. You will physically feel a certain compression inside yourself. Why? At this time, consciousness is trying very hard to attack. And what we call the silver thread, it tries to compress it as much as possible. It uses the last of its strength to defeat you.
It is so interesting. In other words, this is not a compression of the silver thread, but on the contrary, this narrowing
is an extension of the silver thread when a person begins to succeed in something, when he indeed already starts working independently, I'll put it this way, when glimpses appear. Most often this happens when there appear glimpses of a person's contact with the spiritual world, when an answer begins to flash in his practice. And these first rays of hope really begin to give him pleasure. That's when consciousness gets scared. Why? Because if a person partakes of the fruit of the Spirit, consciousness will no longer be able to offer him anything. Why? As they used to say, partaking of the spiritual fruit is what gives the highest joy and pleasure. It is the freedom of personality. It is contact with the real power. It is difficult to describe the practice without creating, let's say, conditions for imitation by consciousness itself. Otherwise, consciousness will begin to give false manifestations, trying to parody true feelings. There is no other way to put it. It also often uses this tool.
Yes, exactly.
When a person sits down to practice, he has little experience yet. He rather thinks than acts, and tries to find out how it is. I'm sitting here, an ordinary person. Well, who immediately wakes up in us? A skeptic, meaning that very consciousness. And it immediately tries to use these kind of tricks and says, you are an ordinary person. It doesn't matter whether you sit down or stand up. You're trying to send love. Where to? To the stomach. The stomach, wants dumplings. Well, you are sending your love to it, right? Where? To the heart. From where and to where, and there it starts. People are often hooked on such thoughts. This is, kind of a bad friend. In every one of us, it is called a demon. It suffers from this caustic sarcasm, so to say, and sometimes you just want to get rid of it. Yet the only place where a person can get rid of it is exactly by immersing into deep practice. But the demon doesn't want that. So in order for us not to learn to get rid of the demon, he starts knocking us out from the very first moments. Yet there are different cases when, on the contrary, the demon begins to teach a person. He supports this, but immediately leads the person astray. He tries to immerse the person as much as possible, as personality, I emphasize, in order for him to come into contact with a greater amount of real. In the end, the demon takes it all onto the material. He pushes the person into magic. Such situations often happen too, friends. Even in people who receive some kind of initial experience, consciousness still begins to incite, saying, you're sitting and practicing, well done, you feel something there, you already even feel how to give your love. to the spiritual world, how to send it to God. But what has God given you in return? And so on. In other words, these very doubts and distractions begin, right?
What are the fruits of your successful practice?
That's exactly the point.
Is there a glow in your head, as they said?
Yeah, where is your glow, right? And sometimes people get carried away. Instead of the inner, true light and real, true love, a person feels that a halo has ignited on him, and he exalts himself. Again, who exalts him? Satan exalts a person like a fool, telling him, okay, sit and meditate, the main thing is to feed me. And the more the better. And then go teach others and tell them how to become a firefly. You can walk at night without a flashlight, and people will see you from afar. Well, isn't that so?
It is.
Unfortunately, the demon is very strong. You shouldn't underestimate his power. A demon is a part of the whole system. It's impossible to defeat him. You can only escape from under his power and control him. I mean, no one has taken away the freedom of choice. Therefore, a human as personality can easily choose those thoughts which he needs at the moment in order to improve his own life. Now let's go back to vacation. Why does a person get distracted during vacation? This is elementary. Consciousness simply trips him up. The demon swindles him. There is no other way to put it. It's enough to distract or weaken a person a little bit, and that's it. The person is already resting. The sea is good enough for him, or whatever, the sea, the forest, everything is wonderful, everything is beautiful. The person is resting, while inside, he becomes more and more empty. Eventually he realizes that after returning from such a vacation, where he forgot about practices and about everything else, he was too busy with all kinds of things, so he hasn't brought anything back, and his body hasn't really rested, except there are photos that can be posted on Instagram or something else.
To collect real.
To collect vril from other people and to brag, yes. But who is interested in that vril? Is it really a human as personality who is, when he gave his vril to his own demon, and now tries to collect someone else's, right?
Igor Mikhailovich, what is the best form of rest for a person who follows the spiritual path?
Yet I have a simple question. First of all, even if a person went on vacation, what has changed? You see?
The scenery.
Merely the scenery. Firstly, how can a person get tired? For example, let's take a family. Someone has another half. Where would you escape, right? He or she wants to go on vacation. Family is family, it is sacred. You engage in your own spiritual development, while the other half doesn't want to. This is...
You cannot just cancel the vacation, right?
Of course, this is a free human being. It is his or her own right, so one can surely go. There's nothing wrong with that, and even for oneself. If a person likes to swim in the sea, why not? Or walk in the mountains, in the woods. There's nothing wrong with that either. What is the best vacation? Everyone has their own preferences. Someone likes skiing, someone likes cycling, someone skydiving, someone else enjoys scuba diving. There are many hobbies, but these are hobbies. As for what can really do a person good, because a vacation must actually do a person good.
Yes, right.
It can be different, and everyone has the right to choose their own, but the best vacation is the one when you can convey your inner state of this divine love to other people, when you can serve the spiritual world, when you can do something really good, and then you feel an additional surge of energy, real energy, and a real surge.
In fact, many people have already tasted the results of such a vacation, Igor Mikhailovich.
I know, yes.
So many people, especially the participants of the Creative Society project and the participants of the Allat movement, choose precisely this kind of vacation. They devote all their vacation time and weekends to informing people.
You know, this very volunteering is truly the service. Service to people, service to the spiritual world. It's a wonderful recreation, but again, people have families.
Of course, absolutely.
Therefore, one should respect the family as well. But who prevents a person, while on that very vacation where he has to go to honor his duty to his family, who prevents him from living for people?
And sharing the truth. and spreading it to all corners of the globe.
Absolutely right. There are certainly cases if people are fond of, traveling somewhere to the far north or to some Antarctica. They surely cannot tell penguins about it. But one does encounter human beings there too.
Well, at least during the journey to the place of destination.
Absolutely right. So everything is not that simple. As long as there is a will, everything will follow, right? I have a simple question. Who prevents a person from enjoying the ocean and performing practices at the same time? Because practice is, I would say, a burden at the first steps. When a person takes the first steps in his spiritual development, that's when it's a little bit difficult and incomprehensible for him. Yes, this period may be prolonged for some people, but it all depends on how strong the demon is and how strong the angel is. A human as an angel, as personality, may be quite weak, and it may take him years, for some people even decades, to partake of this spiritual fruit, whereas for someone, let's say even the first practice is enough, while someone doesn't even need a practice. He can just take it as it is, when it is given to everyone. He can understand and feel it all. It is enough just to open your heart, as they say, so that God's love can enter there. And having understood and felt it all, never to part with it. When a person has felt what God's love is, nothing earthly can replace this. But being on a vacation, when you admire that very ocean or the charm of those very mountains, whatever, or masterpieces in a museum, while you are filled with God's love, will your vacation become more boring or better? Nothing can replace God's love. And when a person really lives while being in practices, in spirit, in love, what kind of tiredness can we talk about? And in reality, only one desire arises in this case: to fulfill everything you can in this world, to repay everyone whom you owe something, everything you owe them, I mean, relatives, friends, and everyone else, to fulfill your duty, and at the same time to serve the spiritual world, to do everything that depends on you, for all of humanity, for the same people as you once were, before you realized what God's love is, and to return home as soon as possible, where it calls you, where the wings themselves carry you. Why? Because that source of love is eternity. And even while being in practices, even at the first, let's say, responses from the spiritual world, a person already begins to feel this bliss. This is really bliss, and especially with the first, stronger and more pronounced manifestations, it all affects even the physical body. And later on, naturally, the body also gets involved in this process, the more of this power. I'm not even talking about Allat, I'm talking about the increase in vril that a person receives in response to what he himself gives. This already changes everything.
It's another level.
Of course.
This power is of different purity.
This is really a filling with love. It is the meaning of human existence. These are indescribable sensations. This is joy. This is love. This is the highest pleasure a person can receive here in this world. Well, how can one rest from what is good? Well, I don't understand this. On the other hand, why refuse it? And how can one refuse it? You know, people refuse it at the first steps. In this case, yes, the demon is still strong. A person has no experience, and these very first steps of his are controlled. They are taken under compulsion, so to say. There is no other way to call it. When a person feels and understands that, yes, it is necessary to perform a practice, that there is something greater behind it, then I'll tell you the following, it is like dumplings under a lid, a glass one. You see them, but in order to take them, you have to do some work. The same is in this case. You feel that there is something good, necessary, and important for you there, but you should work on yourself. So here, as long as there is a weakness, the devil can certainly play. But the closer a person actually approaches the spiritual world, and the more love he receives, the weaker Satan becomes. So the person becomes more active. He wants to do more in this world. But again, we return to those little angels who do not know God's love. How can you, having God's love, not pass it on to them? A simple question, friends. How can you not share that which gives life, that which is the greatest pleasure in this world? A simple question. Of course you cannot but share it.
He said that this love really burns inside.
Of course it burns. That's why you want to pass it on,
Right.
so that people feel it, so that they understand it all, so that, well, again, you see, it's also about experience. When a person stays long, well, what do I mean long? Again, let's just say, what is a long stay in love? By our earthly standards. And there is a difference here. Let's suppose you perform a spiritual practice for an hour, but during 1 minute you will have this true feeling of bliss. Well, that minute becomes an eternity for you. Then you leave the practice, look at the clock, and you just don't get it. Or it can happen the other way around. You enter a practice, and this God's love flows as if for 1 instant, but you look, and several hours of practice have passed. Our consciousness reacts very interestingly to such things, whereas time is actually controlled by our consciousness. So when you come out of practice and already consciousness itself becomes active and begins to evaluate something, it is even interesting to watch it. First of all, how, let's say, slow it is, how unaggressive and cowardly, and it is even afraid to answer a question you need. It is afraid that you will notice it. Well, that's after a good practice.
And it's afraid that it will be spotted.
Of course. But you know what is also very interesting? Is that when a person, for example, abides in God's love in front of that very ocean, not necessarily during practice, but when he lives in his everyday life, after practice, after all, it is important not only to abide in love during practice, but it is important, my friends, to remain in this love even after you come out of practice. This very connection should not be interrupted or lost. Otherwise, as soon as you lose it, the demon will attack. So when you abide in this God's love on that very beach and look at that ocean, you already perceive it as a gift from God, as a great power, which you anyway want to turn into something that gives life to people, something that helps people, and by no means takes their lives or turns into something that, let's say, a demon would like it to turn into. Isn't that so? You look at everything from a different perspective.
You don't want this power to be destructive for people.
Of course.
And you want to become this ocean yourself, in the spiritual sense.
But in the spiritual sense, you aspire to become this ocean anyway. Even during the first practices, when you start feeling this love, when you receive this response, after all, everything changes. Life truly changes. But do you know what the paradox is? It's enough for consciousness, the demon, to break in, just to distract you. And if you, my friend, have succumbed to this temptation from consciousness, and it has distracted you, there is a danger here. The demon can lead you so far into his delusion that you won't find a way back, and then the opposite thing begins. Since he realizes and knows that you have a chance to reunite with the spiritual world, that is, to gain life, which is deathly for consciousness. This causes fear and powerlessness in him. So in order not to lose power over you and not to lose his own life, the demon begins to rage in full force, so to say. And he often brings a person into such difficult psychological states, so to say, by arousing hatred, anger, and whatnot in him. But at the same time, there is another interesting nuance here. The demon tries to explain to the person and supports an idea in him that he has become wiser, smarter, and more sensible, that he has taken him out of this quagmire of a religion or a sect, out of those delusions. Look, now you can see clearly, you have understood that it is all nonsense, and he begins to distract the person with this mess in his head, with the standard toolkit, and draw him away from God. Eventually, he leads the person to a state of subpersonality and continues to reign over him even after the death of the physical body. There's a point in this for consciousness. Do you know what else is funny? We observe people, we see a lot. A person feels and understands that it is not true. He understands that the beast swindles him, that this is literally a lie coming from Satan, who just plays on primary consciousness, on megalomania and pridefulness. Inside, the person feels anguish, yet he still follows the beast. You know, like an animal into a slaughterhouse.
I remember you once said, is there wisdom in having consciousness telling you something? True wisdom means not to lose this very inner connection.
Of course.
If you have lost it, then no matter how smart you are from the position of secondary consciousness, you are a big fool because you have lost the genuine connection with God.
I would put it this way. A smart person is the one who understands how this world is arranged, whereas a wise person is the one who knows and can discern where God and where Satan is. And wisdom lies in choosing that side which can give life. That is what wisdom is. Wisdom is to transform from the inevitably dead to the eternally alive. And there is only one road here, my friends. It is love. So let us just love each other. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Igor Mikhailovich, for everything.
Thank you, friends. Peace be with you.